Welcome to another episode of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? This is a place where readers and writers and creatives come together to talk about my favorite thing, books. I am your host, Karen E. Osborne. I am the author of 4 novels. The latest, True Grace, came out in September, and I'm busy writing number 5. And my guest today is someone who brings together, I talk about this whenever this happens, when my development, nonprofit life comes together with my writer life, I'm always so happy. And Stephanie is a part of both. So let me just tell you a little bit about her. It's something in the water, Stephanie. Something about what development people read or eat or something.
Yes.
Stephanie, how do you say your last name? McLemore?
Macklemore.
McLemore.
Yes.
Stephanie McLemore Bray is a nonprofit consultant and an historical fiction writer. We met over the years, but reconnected in one of those random moments, walking through, I was in Seattle, walking through a hotel lobby, and Stephanie said, "Are you kidding? Aren't you Karen Osborne?" And we reconnected. So definitely a chance meeting. So let's start, Stephanie, with your business.
Sure.
Tell me a little bit about how you came to the consulting world and what your
Yes.
business is like.
Sure. So after 35 years working for a variety of nonprofit organizations, I decided that I would become a consultant and take all of the experience and knowledge, having been both on the fundraising as well as the grant making side, and work specifically with organizations that are that serve or are rooted in or led by BIPOC communities, and giving them the opportunity to work with me and same to help them build their capacity to do more of the good work that they do. Really bringing my perspective on the sector, on opportunities that I've seen, and to really shift the narrative from one of scarcity to abundance, recognizing that those organizations, they know the solutions, but more often than not, they are excluded from connections, networks, and resources that they need to achieve sustainability and to grow.
And to flourish.
Mm-hmm.
So in this climate, it's a little challenging, right? After the murder of George Floyd, then suddenly we were in great demand as consultants. People were knocking on the doors, but now this big DEI pushback is happening. How are you helping your not-for-profit leaders kind of manage this really crummy terrain?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're not leading with DE&I per se. What we're leading with is this idea that, there is brilliance and innovation that exists in those communities that has yet to be leveraged in a way that is equitable, and that really gets at the root causes of inequity. And so, we're very forthright about this idea that there are assets that exist in those communities. While they may not be financial assets, they are assets that have enabled them to thrive in spite of, or to even survive in spite of, the underinvestment, the historical underinvestment of philanthropy in solutions and outcomes that work.
Yes, yes, that's beautiful. That makes so much sense. So, running your own business. I love that you say we. So running your own business what are some of the things you love about it? And what are some of the challenges?
I'll start with the challenges. And that is, as a new entrepreneur, I mean, I just launched in April. Um, it was difficult for me to articulate exactly what I wanted to do. And so I had to take a step back and really start with the ethos. How do I approach this work in a way that aligns with my values? And then what does that look like? And then once I was able to do that, it became easier for me to determine the kind of work that I want to do. And what I've learned is that there is a lot of need. The problem is, how do folks pay for it? And so that's been the challenge. And we've been able to work in partnership with organizations to think creatively. One in particular was able to get a grant for capacity building so that they could hire someone like me to work with them. And so just really encouraging them to think differently, and always coming from this place of abundance, that, there is enough to go around, and that they too have something that is very rich to contribute to the conversation. And so but that'll continue to be a challenge, I think. But it's not one that's insurmountable.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I just say something about that for a second? So I remember early on in the Osborne group, my
Mm-hmm.
son, who now owns the company, but at the time he was working for a tiny little school in Harlem. And all of the graduates, these were poor people. There was 99% of the students were on scholarship.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked him, what do you spend your paltry little budget on? And he said, having great software. He said, on great stewardship, we can't afford to lose any. He
Yeah.
said, and on a good consultant. And I said, really? But how do they afford it? And he said, you have to make decisions when you're little. You've got to make decisions about how to leverage your resources. So it's not
Yeah.
just, it's also a mindset for our not-for-profits
Yes. It
about
really.
what is valuable and
That's.
what is that worth to me.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so the most exciting thing about it, well, there are a couple. One, I get to determine who I want to work with, what projects I want to take on. But the other piece is I have flexibility to write. I have the time to write, which is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And so, just balancing that. I write every single day, which brings me so much joy. And whereas before, when I was working for organizations, Sunday was my one day that I had to write. And now I get to write every day.
Every single day. That is wonderful. The same son who now owns our company, he's a writer as well and working flat out for lots and lots of companies and stuff. But he makes a promise to himself that he will write at least 15 minutes
Yes.
every single day. And it's a gift to himself.
Yes. That is
Yes.
how I think of it. And I'm cranky if I can't get that writing, even like you said. I mean, I now am able to put hours in. But even if I can do 15 minutes at the start of the day, I'm happy. It's a good start.
Yeah. That sounds wonderful. I have another development writer friend who says so she's a development writer for her company, for her organization, and she says, I save my best words for me. I save my best words for me. So it's not that I'm not doing a good job for everybody else,
Right.
but I save my best words for me. I love that. So now you're writing historical fiction, right? Is that what you're working on?
I am. I am.
Tell
And
us about it.
yes, so it started about 25 years ago, when my youngest daughter right after she was born. And, you know, I had this idea come to me, and it started out as a love story. But the deeper that I got into the story and the research, I started to uncover all of these things, these lesser known historical facts. And it just exploded, and it became this amazing story. Um, and in the process, of course, when you do research, you know, as a writer, all kinds of other ideas pop in. And so where I am now is that, you know, this novel that I'm working on and trying to finish, it places very much in a character in the story. And it's from this place that I have a series of novels where this place had some role in the lives of the characters. But it's not that you have to have read each one in sequence or anything like that. But there is a reference. It's an important place for those other folks. And these other novels take place during other periods in history. One
Still in
happened
this geographically the
so
same.
in different places, but there's a tie to that particular town. And so there's one set, the origin novel is set in that town. And then there's a pre kind of period piece where characters have some connection to that town. And then there's another one set in the 70s. There's another novel set in the early 2000s where each of the main characters have some tie back to that particular place. And so it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun.
Yes. So are you actually writing all of them at once?
It's kind of scary, but I pretty much am. But the one that gets most of my time is that first one that really establishes that town, that place, as a significant part of the lives of the other characters in the other novels. And so
Wonderful. So my goodness, so we're talking 4 or 5 novels.
there's probably going to be 4 right now. There are 4.
Now, you know, one of the most important things is you got to finish the first one.
That's right. Yep.
Because we can get ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can get ourselves all excited about it.
Yep.
As I'm working on my 5th one that's coming out next year, I heard, I interviewed a children's story author. And I thought, oh, I hope to write a children's book. And then I read an article in the New York Times about this flock of birds and something that happened to them. And I said, that would make a good children's book. And my husband said to me, but you have a deadline to finish
this other novel.
That's right. Mm-hmm. A deadline. So, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Yes.
So
yes.
As you think about what got you in the writing that, you know, bit you, were there books or authors that kind of really had a profound effect on how you think about writing, how you approach writing?
Absolutely. I mean, as a child, I was an avid reader because I was very shy. I was an introvert. And I loved libraries. I loved reading. I mean, everything. I started with Laura Ingalls Wilder, and I have to credit my mom, who is also a voracious reader to this day. And she introduced me to Nancy Drew and Laura Ingalls Wilder, and you know, and it was amazing to me, these strong characters, right? These girls. But the thing I noticed was there weren't any that looked like me. And so when I was in the 3rd grade, I want to say, and I used to, you know, take the construction paper and that brown paper, and I would get a stapler and I'd make my own books and write my own stories. That's what I did as a little girl. I got in trouble once too. And my mother said, look, if you want to write, I'm going to give you, she gave me my first diary. She said, but you do this after school. You don't do it in school. You need to get your lesson. So she has always been, my biggest fan. And I've just always written. I mean, I kept journals. I think I kept a journal for about 10 years. And I started writing poetry in college, very bad poetry. I'm not a poet. Um, and then I started writing short stories. And then from there, it started to evolve into wanting to write longer pieces. Um, and so there was a period in my life where I had a collection of short stories that I had written. And this was back in the floppy disk days. And the disk was corrupted and I lost them. And I didn't write for 5 years.
Wow.
5 years.
You lost all your work.
Lost it all. And I still have that somewhere because I was like, okay, maybe someday somebody will be able to get this. And I didn't write. I was devastated. And I didn't write
No,
for five
that's an
years.
awful feeling. I still
Yeah.
have every bad poem I ever read, ever wrote.
I
They're
do
all
too.
bad,
I
but I
do.
still have them.
Yeah, I hand wrote those. I still have them. And I go back and I read them. I'm like, oh, these are so bad.
Just
uh,
like maybe one day, I could do something with
I don't know.
them.
I don't know.
So one of
But
the things,
the influencers, to the other thing was,
Mhm.
you talk about what really influenced me, as a reader, um, I read a lot of poetry and just breathtakingly beautiful language. And I thought, okay, well, I'm not a poet, I'm a fiction writer, but there are a lot of elements of poetry that I can incorporate into fiction writing, right? And then, my favorites, Toni Morrison, James Baldwin I started reading him when I was in high school. And since then, it's, Zora Neale Hurston, of course, Marquez blew my mind. When I read, Love in the Time of Cholera, I thought, oh, Faulkner, who just infuriates me, but
yes, yes.
darn, right? And then Colson Whitehead. I mean, the contemporary writers too. I mean, he's
He's
extraordinary. He
wonderful.
writes whatever he wants, which I love.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
those are
James
strong influences.
McBride,
Yep.
you
Yep.
know, he's
McBride. Yes.
pretty amazing. I have so many of the ones that you mentioned on my
Yes.
shelf. August Wilson is one of my faves too.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. I think I've seen every
Yes.
one of his play. I've read them all and I've seen every one of them at least 2 times.
Yes. Yes.
So we like to recommend. Now we have just shared an amazing list of writers with our audience. But is there a book or two that that you recently read or you have on your nightstand that you're going to read that you could recommend to our audience?
I do. So I've read because I was taking a count of how many books I've read in the last 6 months. And it's a combination of both fiction and nonfiction. And so I read there are two books that were just stunning fiction. Um, S.A. Cosby's All the Sinners Bleed, which is,
Love him. Have
man.
you read Blacktop Wasteland?
No, I haven't read that one. I'm going
You
to read that.
must.
And I
It
also,
is
mhm.
amazing.
And I read the second book he wrote too, Razor Blade Tears.
Yes, yes. Got to go
And
back to the
so,
first.
yes, but I will, that's on my list. Um, and then I revisited an older novel, Ernie Gaines. I just finished My Father's House, which is the only novel he wrote from a third person omniscient, because he writes
Mm.
from first person. And he talks about this in another book that I'm recommending. It's called How We Do It. And it is
Mm.
a book it's Black writers on the craft, practice, and skill of writing. And it's edited by Jericho Brown, who is a poet. And it's presented by the Hurston Wright Foundation, of which I'm a board member. It's one of the oldest Black literary organizations in the country. HarperCollins published it. It's extraordinary. It's
Wow. Thank
extraordinary.
you.
I recommend it highly. I mean, it's like a master class. It really is. It's in these essays for anyone who writes any genre. I highly recommend it. I do. Uh,
You. This
and
has
then
been
the
a
other book,
wonderful list.
yeah, it's
This is,
great. And then
this is
it's
a wonderful list. You have one more.
yeah,
Okay, one more.
one
I
more.
see it in your hand.
One more. This is by Dr. Imani Perry. It's called South to America. And it's a combination memoir and history of the civil rights movement, of um, racism, and she intertwines stories about her family. And there are so many little known facts about the South that really help you understand, you know, how the South evolved and didn't. So really, really interesting, and especially if you write historical fiction, as I do, much of which is centered around this place in the South. And I was born in the South, so it gave me a lot of insight into my own novel. And so, yeah.
Excellent. This is so good. This has been
Uh-huh.
such a fun interview. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as
I
we
have.
have enjoyed it.
I
So,
have.
Stephanie, how can our audience find you? How can they know more about your business? How can they keep track of when you're going to publish your first book?
Yeah. So two ways. Follow me on LinkedIn, Touchstone Leadership Group. We have a page. And then I, Stephanie McLemore Bray, have a page on LinkedIn, and that's where folks can read about the work that we're doing. And then I have on the X, formerly known as Twitter, I am author Bray. I'm still on it. I'm deciding, how much longer. But those are the ways that folks can connect with me.
Sounds wonderful. I know what you mean about X. I'm still on it, but pondering.
Yes.
Pondering. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad you said hello to me in the lobby in Seattle. It was so cool, and I look forward to staying in touch with you. I hope you will stay in touch, that you will follow Stephanie on LinkedIn, and that you will follow her on Twitter because she's still there. So follow her. And if she leaves, she'll let you know where she's gone. So please follow her. I hope you will follow me on Facebook page, my YouTube channel, Instagram, Twitter, any of those places, because following us makes a difference. So we appreciate you. Until next time, I hope that you will rejoin me next week, next Tuesday, the next issue of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? A great week. And thanks for joining us.